you're the one asking questions with your co-host on a podcast. So we're turning the tables around a little bit on you, maybe with this, but we're really interested in hearing a little bit about your passion for the packaging industry and your experience connecting with the people in that industry. But the first thing I just sort of want to zoom out because I have a question a little bit about your personality. It seems like you really do have a true passion for helping to create change. Um, you're not just a packaging enthusiast, but you're literally a pastor.
Yeah.
And I feel like from what I've seen online and from what I know about you beforehand, those two things both come out at the same time. Can you share a little bit about sort of the interplay between your passion for packaging, but also sort of maybe your purpose for trying to create a better life for others?
Yeah, definitely. You make me sound like I have some like sick virus though. Like it's
Yeah,
coming out both ends.
you
I don't
only
know.
have 3 or 4 years to live. This is going to be really interesting. It's really you got to watch it now because you know.
Oh, I love that question. And I'm excited to be on the other side. As the great philosophers, the Wu-Tang Clan said, bring the ruckus. That's what I say. So yeah, if you're playing bingo, we're going to cover packaging, Wu-Tang, and also pastor. So maybe we'll dip into whiskey at some point in time. I actually don't know a
Good.
lot of whiskey, but I do enjoy it. Yeah. So I had an opportunity. I don't even know how many years ago it was, like pre-COVID time. It's just like, I don't know if it was the mid 90s or 2015. I just generally don't remember time before COVID, it seems like. But I had a moment when I was living in Colorado Springs and I was pastoring a church. So I was the primary teaching pastor on a Sunday at a church called Aletheia Church in Colorado Springs. And I was working for WS Packaging at the time, and I was selling packaging. And I had helped start the church, and our church had gotten to a point where they were like, we think we can bring you on full time to be a full-time paid vocational pastor. Up until that point, I had only been volunteer. I hadn't taken a penny from the church in terms of compensation. Actually, I never stole money from the church either. That sounded I used to joke. I was like, hey guys, I'm in sales. So like whatever comes in from the offering on a Sunday, like if I do a really good job and we just crush the offering, like, can I get 10%?
That gold plate,
I mean, just a little.
divided.
No, I never did. So I had this opportunity and I was really wrestling with it. And that kind of around that same time, I had meetings. I was doing some work in the cannabis space. And so I was meeting with people up in Denver. And I think around that time I went out to Seattle and had some meetings around cannabis packaging. And I was meeting people from, spending time with people in like the LGBTQ community who were involved in packaging. And then I was traveling to Utah and I was meeting with, people of the LDS faith. And I just had this vast like cornucopia of people that I got to interact with. And for me, like I still like, I love reading the Bible. I love studying it. And it's one of the more beautiful things about my Christian faith is that, I believe that heaven is going to look like that there will be people from every tribe, every nation, and every tongue. And sometimes we miss that in the church. Like Dr. King said that the most segregated the most segregated hour in America is Sundays. And so in my job in packaging, I really got to experience like a bit of heaven on earth, just meeting with different people. And so that was really my driver in saying, yeah, I'm not leaving my faith. I'm actually going to press more into this beautiful industry that really nobody's really talking about how incredible it is. All of the different people, it is a truly global industry. I've had people on my podcast from every single continent except for Antarctica, which maybe one day I'll have somebody go to Antarctica. So that was kind of my driver behind really pressing into getting passionate about the packaging industry. It wasn't like, boy, I really love digital printing, or the smell of like ink, like UV inks just gets me excited. That wasn't it at all. It was the people that I got to meet across all different backgrounds. That's what drove my passion. And then after that, is when I started to see like, wow, we actually make a difference in the world. We can, I believe that we're called to be good stewards of the world. And so I get to be a good steward. I get to be an evangelist. I get to, bring love and good news into the world in in kind of a more non-traditional way. So
I think that comes across in the podcast, which, by the way, ranges from topics to like dry molded fiber to Weenus Wednesdays with your
yeah,
son and everything in between. How do you find the sources? To walk us maybe through the high notes of your process for finding the people that you end up talking to on the podcast. Something that Chris and I do for our Unvarnished series at D-Scoop.
yeah, it's a very refined process. You will find that it's not refined at all.
Right. You have the same one as we do. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. Early on, I really sought out people because there was no packaging podcast that I could find when I started it with my good friend Ted Tate, who's been kind of he's had a really busy life the last couple of years, so he hasn't been as involved, but I still get to hang out with him and chat with him. He's still a dear friend of mine. And so when we first started, we really had to seek people out. And when you would reach out to someone like, "Hey, do you want to be on a packaging podcast?" They were like, "What? There's a podcast about packaging?" Like, sure. Like everyone just that's kind of what they said, right? It was like, I guess. And as it kind of grew in popularity, I don't actually seek people out any longer. Most of the time people are just coming to me, or I'll see an interesting thing on LinkedIn and I'll reach out to them and I'll just say, "Hey," it's usually like, "I know that on your bucket list is be a guest on a packaging podcast. Do you want to fulfill that part of your life?
You want to cross that thing
You want
off.
to cross that?" Yeah. But like when I had Sean Riley on from Dude Wipes, I met him on an airplane, right? And he came on and was just a tremendous guest. That was the one with my son where we're talking about
Right.
weenuses
Right.
and butt. So yeah, there's not really much of a process. And so far, I'm 175 interviews in as of this recording, and I haven't had to go find people.
Right. One more question before, as I hog the interview time, and before I cede it to Chris, who I know has questions too. What have you learned in the process of creating this podcast?
Oh man, that's probably a whole episode of just me talking. Honestly, it's been the biggest source of work joy, has truly been showing up, being present, and getting, as my friend Keenan, who wrote Gap Selling, says, fearlessly curious with somebody. And I found that there's a lot of nuance to topics like sustainability. I found that nobody really has all the answers, and that's just fine. I found that there are people all across the world who are wildly intelligent, who are doing incredible things for the planet that they don't get a whole lot of shine. And I'm excited to be able to give them just, a little tiny bit on my podcast. So, I think that's a very broad statement. And like I said, I could really dive into, talking to people like Sean or people like Jake Carls from Midday Squares up in Montreal, these CPG owners, Mark Samuel from I1 Organics, like these people who are, they're not packaging people, but they own these CPG companies. And we could talk about their challenges and learning about what that meant, and then taking those learnings and helping my son start his company. That's been incredible. Taking learnings from sustainability experts and figuring out, like I just had a recent episode with 12 Tides where we talked about regenerative farming and kelp. And it, like the list just keeps going on and on and on and on. And that is legitimately the way that I get paid the most, is just in knowledge and in a really fun and cool, diverse network.
How do you find time to balance that with, like, I don't know, a full-time job?
Yeah. Okay. So this is, I've shared this a couple different times, so I apologize if anyone's heard me repeat this before, but I'm just going to say it. So there's 168 hours in a week. I'm awake for about 114 of those hours every week. And people can make more money, people can make less money, people can have more stuff, people can have less stuff, but time is agnostic. Time it's socialistic in nature, right? Everybody has 168 hours. You can't create more and you can't have less taken away unless of course you pass away. So because of that, and when I learned that early on when I was a college pastor at the Colorado State University, which is the Harvard of the Rockies, go Rams, when I was there, I would meet with college students and I found out that they were really bad at managing their time. And when I just started walking through with them doing kind of time audits, I realized, you know what? I'm not really great at this. I am unintentional with a lot of my time. And when you really take a look at it and you think, I work about 40 hours a week. And to be honest, some of my work and sort of content creation, they go hand in hand, right? There's a crossover there, which is really healthy for me. I don't think I could do, say, I don't know, be the general manager of a manufacturing facility and have to be in the plant for 50 hours a week and then also do this. That would be tough. But if you take out that 50 hours a week, you're still left with 68 hours of time every single week. And it's amazing what can happen if you focus 3 of those hours every week on one particular thing. You still have 65 other hours, but you take 2 or 3 hours a week, you put it in your calendar, you plan it, you execute it. It really adds up, especially when it's focused. And so I don't have much of a process for like finding guests or, like much of a vision for whatever all this stuff is. I am very focused and intentional on my time every week. I talk with my wife about it constantly. How am I doing? We have 5 kids. So how am I doing at home? Am I present? Am I around when I'm around? Am I on my phone? Like she has full accountability with me on that. So that's where I find it, is because it's there for everybody. If you don't, the average American spends about 40 hours a week consuming social media content. There's your time. There, it's right there. There's for the average American.
So slices of that 68 hours turned into recently a children's book and some rapping. Tell us about either one of those, or maybe both.
Yeah. So the kids book has been going on for a while now. That's been a couple of year process that we just finalized. That should be coming out in Q1 of 2023. It's called The Packaging Peaks and the Sticky Situation. And it's literally a story about my family that my wife and kids and I wrote. So again, that had more time back then, but that doesn't consume a whole lot of my time right now. I love the genre of hip hop music. I have since I was a kid. That's what I wanted to be when I was growing up. I wanted to be a rapper named Candy Cane when I was in elementary school. I wrote raps all the time. But no, I still, it's my creative outlet. So I write, I write down kind of slam poetry and hip hop lyrics. I very rarely ever record them, but they sit in my brain and they go around, and that's my outlet in the mornings. I read my Bible, pray with my wife, drink some coffee, and write hip hop lyrics and poetry. So that's I have on occasion done I did make one song and put it on iTunes. It's okay. It's real, and I don't mean that like a humble brag. Like it's just kind of like meh. But yeah, that's my my outlet.
Cool.
Well, you have another one, and because I noticed it. You're coaching too.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. I'm the varsity basketball coach. I'm the volunteer varsity basketball coach in my kids' high school. And that will end in February, likely February, early March. That has been the most difficult thing that I have had to undertake from a time perspective, because that's one of those things that's not very flexible, right? You got your games, you got to go to your games. You got your practice, you got practice. And I love basketball. I played it my whole life. I still play pickup basketball. I love the sport, and I will fall asleep thinking about it and wake up at 4 a.m. trying to devise a play to go against the 2-3 zone that just beat us, right? Like that's just what happens. So, and I knew that going into it. My son's school needed a coach, and I was option 1 and 10. So it was either that or it's a really small school. So there's only 30 to 40 boys in the entire high school. My son's he's, I think, objectively a really good basketball player, and he's a freshman and wanted to play in high school. And so I stepped up, but I told the athletic director, 1 season, I am the interim volunteer varsity basketball coach, and that is all I can do.
Well, kudos to you. That having coached 1 year at high school level, it is a time commitment, and you never turn off. That's why I was thinking when you're saying you're writing down the songs, I know you're also writing down plays. I mean, there's no way that you're not spending a little time there with the
I've been doing a lot less songwriting since about October.
Yeah, you're all about.
You're all about 1-3-1 zone press.
Yeah,
it takes a while. Yeah.
Oh, there's nothing like a good pin screen here and there. I mean,
yeah,
I know. When you're dreaming about blobs and slobs, if you know what that, if you're a basketball person, then you'll know what that means. Baseline out of bounds, the sideline out of bounds. For those of you who are like, what is he talking about?
Yeah,
it's a whole thing.
Well, that'll be a whole nother podcast we could do.
I know, we could probably do it now. My coaching career ended, I think, in 4th grade. 4th grade girls basketball was the pinnacle of my knowledge. So you had to bring enough drinks and say enough positive things, but that's kind of it.
Orange slices. Yep.
Orange slices, right?
Yep.
All right, going back to like business here.
Segues are weird.
Segue, very weird segue. From
Segues are weird.
Blobs and slobs, which there's a lot in our industry.
Yeah.
How about that for a segue?
Right on. Speaking of the 1-3-1 press, sustainability.
Yeah. I mean,
you could have gone with, speaking of presses.
Oh, yeah.
This is why you're the podcast packaging pastor.
I'm just throwing that out there. We could have gone with that segue.
I could have. So how does this work into your work? Like, how do you've been doing this through how many different positions? Like, how do they view what you do? I'm just
so curious. I started everything when I was at WS Packaging, and this was really when I started to press in. As I kind of mentioned, I had that kind of critical moment in my life of like, what am I going to do? And I decided to do this. And so at WS and at Fortis, I was a sales rep, right? I had a budget, I got paid commissions, all of that stuff. And so I'm a big believer in blue ocean strategies. And you mentioned Gary V. I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk and was kind of following his stuff. And I started to realize, like, okay, if I'm going to press into this, I want to go where everyone else isn't. And I did have a little bit of an advantage because I had been a packaging buyer from 2007 to 2010. That was how I got into the industry from my uncle's company in San Diego. So I had heard a lot of and seen a lot of like bad selling, or maybe it's not bad. It's just normal. The normal cadence, the normal call scripts, the normal emails. It was all normal is what everyone else was doing. And so a lot of it came from just wanting to be different. And I thought, if I can just create value in this space, specifically on LinkedIn, I think there's going to be a lot there. I think there's going to be a lot of people there. And I don't think there's a lot of salespeople who are not pitchy on LinkedIn, that are just simply there to bring value. And so I started to do that. And, honestly, I didn't have there wasn't a lot of like, hey, go get them. But there also wasn't any like throttling back. It was just sort of like, let's see what's going to happen here. You know what I mean? And when I started to show data and numbers, turns out people want to work with people who bring them value and are helpful and useful. And we started to bring on a whole lot of work, and I could trace it back to, hey, this came from this post and this person reached out to me here. And, anymore today, I get cold called by brands. Brands pick up the phone and call me. And in some cases have paid me to come and talk to their whole packaging team. about sustainability trends, about what I'm seeing in the marketplace. And so there's been a whole 360 or 180, 360 would be all the way, a whole 180 that has happened. But early on, that's how it contributed. Was I was responsible for generating sales, and I knew that this was a way that I could be different and carve out a different lane, was through kind of quote social selling. And so so that's what I did. And, like I said, both companies some people were more supportive than others. Nobody was like really a detractor, although I'd hear you kind of like snide side comments here or there. Like, you show up late for a conference call because that was before Zoom. And it's like, oh, what were you doing? Like posting on LinkedIn again? It's like, okay, real funny. Let's get to it. Stuff like that, but it didn't really bother me. Myers reached out to me specifically because of, or didn't reach out to me. I had been talking with Myers because of my social media presence, and they were just asking me questions about it. When I decided to leave Fortis and go into full-time consulting, I reached out to Myers and I was talking with them about doing some consulting work for their sales team. And Chris Dillon and Michael Dillon, who are the co-majority owners of Myers, were like, no, we want you full-time here. We want to, and by the way, don't throttle back. Like, what can we do to encourage you? How can you be out there more? We see so much value in what you're doing. And so they were really the first people to just be like, no, we are all in on what you're doing. And that's not to say that people at Fortis and the WS were like not supportive. I don't mean to say that, but they were just like, we want you on the team. We value what you're doing. We see it as a future of our business. And you're here. So now I do a lot of training with our sales reps. I bring in a ton of leads for the company that then now I don't have to go close. I just get to go close is a weird word. I don't have to go follow up on and see if there's value. I have a team of sales reps that gets to do it.
Which is exactly why I asked the question earlier, and you answered it differently, which was, how do you do this with your normal job? Because I was always curious, like how valued it was, and how that not every company values social media and its effects. And I was wondering how much of a asset Myers or others kind of looked at it, or whether or not this was, hey, do that on your own time, Adam. And that's what I was curious about, because I think a lot of people in our industry, well, in any industry, poo-poo the strategy and the strength of social media as a selling tool.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah,
because I think this is really important. I don't know if who's going to be listening to this, or if there's someone in an executive leadership role. You need to understand something that has happened in America, and we miss this in the packaging industry, but it's critically important to understand that it used to be that kids grew up, not everyone wanted to be a rapper named Candy Cane, but they wanted to be some kind of job, like an athlete or a doctor or a pilot or something like that. The number one thing kids want to be today when they grow up is a social media influencer. And we can go, kids these days and blah, 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 right? But we do that to our detriment, and we do that out of ignorance. If you tell somebody under the age of 18 today to go search for something, do you know where they go?
TikTok.
They go to TikTok. They go to YouTube. They don't go to Google at all, right? And so having an understanding of social media is, I would say, is almost a non-negotiable today. In order to be able to sustain your future as a corporation. Now, that's not to say like you're gonna fail in business if you don't have a social media presence, but your business is probably not good at social media, but your people know what they're doing. I'll give you an example. So we had a lady at Myers. She's working in the shipping department. I was there kind of giving a business review, and I was talking about TikTok. And she came up to me and she's like, I love TikTok. And I was like, great. Like, do you want to help us make some videos? And we paid her, an extra 5 to 10 hours a week to make videos on her own and for Myers. And so now that side of our business is growing as a brand, but your people are probably a lot better at it as personalities, as individuals. And so encouraging them to have their own voice in the market. While yes, you lose it if they lose or if they leave. It is, I can't even state how valuable that is to a company today, because people want to work with people. That's always been the case. But where are the people today? They're not answering their phones. They don't want you to call their cell phones. And email marketing is, while it still has some effectiveness, is done really poorly. I get a lot of emails. I'm sure everyone else does. There's a lot of really crappy email marketing. How else are you going to get in touch with people if you're not going to go where they're at?
Yeah, I've always, Chris and I know is a big proponent of employees having their own brand, kind of, or just getting out there without having to go through some sort of layered corporate, policy about how to sound. That was one thing, like you want the company to sort of sound in a different way, but if you have all these people posting, then you can't control that. But what a lot of principals get is that they can't control that.
Right.
So you have to sort of pick between whether you're going to do a lot of it or almost none of it. And I feel like most companies consciously or subconsciously choose one of those two paths. And the ones where there's not 19 layers of editors saying this doesn't sound like ABC company, Tammy, are probably doing it a lot better to just unleash your true personality and have that be okay and trust it,
Anymore, I think you can't control it. It's like a wild goose, right? Like it's uncontrollable. Social media is not something that a company can really control any longer. And so why not lean into that? Why not press into that? We all buy the same presses. We all buy from the same material manufacturers, the same ink manufacturers, right? Like your most valuable commodity today is your people and their voice. And so I think the companies that really value that and who are willing to unleash their people are the ones who are gonna be set up for success when Gen Z and whatever the generation behind them really starts to make a lot of the B2B decisions. You're gonna find yourself in a really good position. I'm thinking and I'm betting on that. And so far I haven't been wrong on my bet. And I think I'm still gonna be correct. I didn't expect to go all soapboxy on you guys. I'm sorry.
No, I'm so glad you did, because I mean that's what's
I love it.
Yeah, it's exactly what we've been seeing. I mean, we have 16,000 members in D-Scoop, and I can count on probably two hands and maybe get into my 1 foot that of how many companies are really leaning into it and doing it well.
Yeah, it's because there hasn't been an immediacy to it. It's the printing industry, the printed packaging industry has been doing pretty freaking great, right? I mean, for the most part, we're doing just fine. Do you know what I mean? And so the long-term prognosis seems to be a lot of companies like, well, we'll just keep doing just fine. It's like, well, we're also struggling to keep to recruit and retain younger people in our industry. We have, I think, a problem with recruiting diverse candidates from different backgrounds. If you want to solve those problems, and those are going to be part of your long-term success, I think you've really got to press into people and letting them be who they are, and let the results come in whichever way it happens.
Well, you just knocked out one of the other subjects I was going to ask you about, which is recruiting and getting younger people into the industry, and there you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch. Like I'll give you a really silly but kind of fun example. So, like I've said, I'm a big basketball fan. I've followed the sport for a while, and I started to pay attention to like name, image, and likeness deals. And so I was like, you know what would be fun? What if I found a packaging student who is an athlete, and I did an NIL deal with it, like through my podcast. And it wasn't much. I mean, literally it was not much. But I found this kid, his name's Carson Moe. He's a basketball player at UW Stout, Division III basketball program. And I was like, hey, Carson, can I sign you to an NIL deal? And this is what I'm going to pay you. And it's going to be during your basketball season. I sent him out some swag, and it was awesome. And the unintended consequence of that was that Carson not only like talks to his fellow packaging students about about me and about Myers. More people started listening from UW Stout to my podcast. Carson, we hired him as an interim at Myers. Wow. An intern at Myers to teach him about business development. He worked there over the summer. And now he's, we're hopeful and considering that he would come on as like a full-time employee when he graduates.
Wow.
Great story.
And so I'm just a one single person, and I paid him out of my account. There are companies that are almost literally printing money today. They have so much. Like, why aren't you tapping into your local community colleges, your local junior colleges, finding, even if there are trade schools and stuff like that, like high schoolers can get NIL deals. Why wouldn't you be leveraging this aspect of modern day American economics and actually paying people to be influencers, paying athletes to be influencers, paying young people who have followings? There's a guy named Jeb the Boxsmith on TikTok who's like 19 or 20 years old. He's got a couple 100,000 followers. He makes stuff out of corrugate. I can't understand why 0 corrugated companies have reached out to Jeb the Boxsmith to say, I love what you're doing. How can we partner with you?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right. Last thing I got to check off here before I forget is sustainability. And this could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. How important do you really think it is for companies right now? Is it truly important to them? Or is it a veneer?
There seems to be a difference between notion and action. Yeah.
Yeah. I think companies are, well, let me say this. I've not met a single company who wants to be less sustainable. And no one's like, I want to spend more money on worse packaging that can have a higher carbon footprint. Please put me in touch with those who are slaughtering endangered animals so that I can support their cause, and we can use elephant ivory to line the walls of our corporate office, right? So we know that that's not happening.
I think I worded that poorly. My question.
So for sure, companies desire to be sustainable. Now, how they actually execute it, I think, is a thing that gets called into question, and rightly so. It's okay for us to call them into question, but I don't think that the desire is lacking, because there's funding behind it. There's profits to be made behind it. A lot of these companies are trying to figure out, how do we tap into a younger generation of buyers and consumers, and you have to be able to do that. The problem is that there are a lot of companies who unknowingly are engaging in a level of greenwashing, and they get called out and then they adjust. But I think for sure it's there, and I don't think it's going to go away. I just think that we're in this weird place where companies don't really know, do you make it more recyclable? What does it mean to be recyclable? Do we look at compostable or biodegradable, or do we just reduce? And what happens if we reduce our carbon footprint, and if we reduce the size of our box, and blah, blah? Like, there's just 1,000 questions, and companies, I think there's a bit of a paralysis sometimes, and they just go, screw it. Just going to make it recyclable and slap the thing on there. And then people are like, that's not actually widely recyclable. It doesn't matter. We can claim it. And because it's so hard.
Right.
And candidly, so I put up a TikTok just the other day. I was in Costco and I was like, hey, look, has anyone noticed how Apple packaging, not the phone, but the actual fruit, has really transitioned over to almost all paperboard? And then there were people who were like, that's the answer to our sustainability. Let's cut down more trees. And I'm like, well, what did you want them to do? Like, what's the alternative that you were hoping that? And it's like, well, don't buy from Costco. It's like, oh my gosh, like, how is that even an answer right now? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
People just, and so these brands see this stuff, they pay attention to it. And it's like, well, we can't win. We go to paper packaging, we're cutting down too many trees. We use plastic and we reduce our carbon footprint because our food waste goes down, and we're emitting less methane gas. Well, now we're using plastic, and we're killing turtles in the ocean. So then what do? The only answer is just go out of business. Like, don't sell fruit. I mean, that's the conundrum that I think a lot of brands find themselves in. And that's why you probably see a lot of that, like, action seems to be a little bit less, is because most brand owners from big companies are just like, I don't know, cross our fingers that this one works.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I'm really hopeful for, like, I just saw an article about, some innovations in, like, nuclear energy, and, getting to a place of, like, hyper clean energy. If we didn't have to, in the packaging industry, really have to be part of the, like, greenhouse gas emission climate change conversation, and we could just be about, like, how do we get our product in the most efficient way with the least amount of waste to get from point A to point B, then I think the conversation will shift, and there'll be a lot more clarity behind it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's pretty succinct in the mindset of packaged goods companies. I mean, they're in a no-win situation right now because they can't control a lot of the things that they're being slammed for.
Yeah. There's no way to. I can tell you everything that's wrong with every single sustainable material. Everything, because I see it because I post on TikTok almost every day, and I hear about it from people, thousands of people, right? Like, I hear all the problems, and these brands hear them too. There's always something wrong. So the most sustainable thing to do is not make that product. That's the most sustainable thing to do. Just not make it.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty tough way to keep growing a company.
We're really appreciative that you took the time out to chat with us.
Yes.
That was awesome. I loved it. Thank you for inviting me. And like I said before the call, I was like, I guess I got to get ready to ask them some questions. Like, no,
there's just.
I was like, yeah,
It's let me this free. Yeah.
That's awesome. We took a little bit off your plate today, sort of.
No, it was fantastic. I loved it. And honestly, I've been following D-Scoop for quite some time, and love what you all are doing for the industry, and just some of the innovations and the conversations that come from it. So it's an honor to be part of your community this way.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you be part of it.
Yep, for sure. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, everybody.